everyone, so in this video we're going to take a look at how to make a mini golf game in Unity. I already demonstrated how to make the golf courses themselves using Asset Forge. In fact, that's probably how you're going to spend the bulk of your time with this particular game because the controls are very easy. The bulk of what you're trying to do is make a golf course that is challenging and innovative. So I personally used Asset Forge. Reason for it is because it already has a golf category. So you're just taking tiles, laying them out, and creating a golf course within a matter of minutes. You save it as in, well, actually you export it as an OBJ, and then you choose the Unity folder where your project is. And when you do that, it will appear here and here. This controls the material, so this needs to be here as well. Okay, so you've created your golf course, and actually for your game, you'll obviously have multiple. At the moment, I only have one for this particular video. If you decide that you don't like the materials that you used and you want to change them, you can certainly do that in Unity. When you have the asset selected, there are 4 tabs here in the inspector. You just click on material, and this button would be active. You click on extract materials, and then the individual materials, as you can see, there's 2 of them, are then separated out as their own assets, and then you can modify them. In this case, for the green, I took this plaster image, put it here on albedo, and for the brown, I took this wood grain image and put it on the albedo. There's nothing special about these. One's a JPEG and one's a PNG, if I recall correctly. And so just in case you don't like the materials you used, you can modify them. Okay, so let's actually put our 3D model into our scene. Okay. Now, a few things I want to call out. One, when you put the asset into the scene, for some reason, it creates this parent. So you can see that there is actually a parent transform object, and then the child is here also with the transform object. So not quite sure why it does that in Unity, but yeah, when you import models, I don't see this all the time, but I see this some of the time, and that it creates this separate golf parent object. Technically, you could delete it. It's just an empty object with a transform component, and this has its own transform component. So just wanted to call that out. Okay, so what do we need to do? We need to have collisions be detected on this because we need it to be solid. So we're going to go to, again, that child object. You can see that this has the mesh renderer, so this is what draws it. This is what makes you see the image, but there's no actual collisions. So we're going to go to Add Component. We're going to go to Physics, and we're going to go to Mesh Collider. You can look, you can see that the circle there tells you that the mesh does indeed surround the hole, so the ball should pass through there. Okay, so that should do for now. And now what we need the golf ball. So we're just going to go to Game Object, and we're going to go to 3D Object. We're going to just make a sphere, and we'll just make this like 0.1. I believe that's small enough. Just want that level at the ground. Now the sphere being made in Unity, it already has a collider, so we don't have to add that, but we do need to add a rigid body. So with our sphere selected, we click on Add Component, Physics, Rigid Body, and we can leave these default settings. For now, anyways, we will change them later. Okay, so the bulk of the control for this game is only going to be about half a dozen or a dozen lines of code. It's pretty straightforward because there's really only 2 things you care about. You care about which direction the ball is facing, because what you want to do is you want to say, I want the ball to always move forward. So it doesn't matter so rather than saying add velocity on X or Y or Z, you're going to say add velocity to forward, the forward direction. So that's the two things you care about. You care about the angle, which we'll set using your angle, and you care about adding velocity, and we'll do that by adding velocity and then forward. And then you'll see that in just a couple seconds. So let's go ahead and do that. What you're going to do, you're going to right click, create C#, and you're going to make a script, and I called it ball con. You're going to click on your golf ball object, and then you just drag and drop it. And then you go ahead and open that up. So a couple things. You want to be able to rotate the ball because you need to aim the ball. And you also want to be able to reset it back, that once it's done moving, you want to be able to reset it so it's facing forward again. And two, you want to be able to determine how fast the ball is going to move. So we're going to create two variables. They both float. So you can call this whatever you want. I called it y-ang for y angle, and I set it to 0. That way it's facing forward. And then private float, and this is for val because it's going to be the forward velocity, and we set it to 1. So that way, even if you don't angle the ball or do anything, if you just hit the ball, it will indeed move, and it will move in a predictable direction. Okay, this is very much placeholder, but it demonstrates the fundamentals. So you're going to use the space bar to increase the forward velocity. You can use whatever you want in your game. You might actually do on-screen buttons. Like say you want to make a mobile game, then you might use on-screen buttons that say add force, reduce force, that kind of thing. So we're going to check the space bar. So if input.getKeyDown space, then take that forward velocity and add 1 to it. So 4 val plus equals 1. Now we're going to take this same kind of control scheme. This time I'm going to say if input.getKeyDown is A, then we want the Y angle to be reduced by 15 degrees. And then we go ahead and apply that. So transform.UAngles equals new vector 3, 0, y-ang 0. So we're setting this value, and then we're applying it. And again, when you do this, this applies this command to the object the script is attached to. This object is the script is attached to the sphere object. And again, same kind of scheme. Input.getKeyDown D. In this case, we'll take that y angle variable and add 15 to it. Now, obviously, in your case, you're going to use much smaller numbers. Only being angled by 15 degrees isn't really easy. But again, this is placeholder just to demonstrate that it's working. If I have it changing by 1 to 2 degrees, it's kind of hard to tell the difference. But if it changes in increments of 15, it'll be easy to see that it's working. And then it's just rinse and repeat. Again, transform.UAngles equals new vector 3, 0, y-ang 0. And then the last thing is we're going to give the player, at least at the moment, the ability to reset this on a key press. We probably won't use a key press in the final version of the game. This is again for testing. But ultimately, like I said, we want this to be reset to 0, 0, 0 at the end of every shot. That way you can predictably angle the ball. And what we'll probably do is in the final version, we could have a command that looks for velocity. And if it gets below a certain velocity, then we just stop it. Because unfortunately, if I didn't say it already, Unity's built-in physics is kind of wonky and it's kind of odd. So you'll see as we get into this. Okay, so that gives you the ability to control the forward velocity. It gives you the ability to control the angle and set the angle because we didn't set the velocity, we only set the variable. Okay, now in this section, on mouse down, and again, you might change this for your game, but this is just for the purposes of ease. On mouse down, so when the mouse is clicked on the object the script is attached to, again, that's the sphere, then get component rigid body velocity equals transform forward. This is what I was saying about, because very often you'll see velocity equals new vector 3, and then it'll say some number or some variables. You're not saying that because you want this to always move forward. So transform.forward times forward velocity. So forvel, that variable that we created. And just so you know, this 2 doesn't give you a whole lot of control. So right now we're increasing this by 1. Probably you're going to want that to increase by maybe 0.2. And if you do a decimal, then you have to do like 0.2f. You have to add that f when you use decimals, at least when you're setting values for variables. And that is like 90% of it. There's a few things this does not do. For instance, this doesn't control the camera movement, but that's pretty easy. And there's obviously no scoring and there's no UI. In other words, you're just seeing the golf course and you're clicking on the ball. So even though you're changing the angle, you're not demonstrating to the user what the angle is. We know it because we're looking at the code, but the player won't. So I don't want to overstate how much we've done, but I don't want to understate either. This is the core gameplay, but you do have to add those bells and whistles, such as maybe an arrow. And when you rotate the ball, the arrow rotates and it will show you what direction the ball is going to move. And then if you hit the space key, that arrow stretches to show that there's more force, that kind of thing. Or maybe you're going to create an overlay, a HUD UI that has a separate force meter. That is your choice if you wish to do that. Again, this is not meant to be the only way. This is not meant to be the best way. This is meant to be a way, and a way that is hopefully clear to understand. So let's do this, and then you're going to see one issue, and that is, like I said, how the physics is wonky, and that's where you're going to spend some time is tweaking that. I'll do a little bit more of that, but then that will probably be it for this video. And any additional videos will be if you want specialty things like it's mini golf. So maybe you want a windmill with a spinning blade. I showed how to make the windmill. I didn't show how to control it though. Maybe you want portals, that kind of thing. So I certainly can show you how to do that. Sand traps, if it hits a sand trap, how do you slow it down? Things like that. Okay, so we run this. And if I click on this, it should move, but only a little bit because the default velocity is 1. Sure enough. Now see how it keeps going? That is really, really wrong. There's no drag. It's not slowing down. Well, it slowed down a little bit, but just kept going. So that's why I talked about how the physics is wonky. Next, we need to... Actually, I didn't try the angle. Sorry about that. So let's press A twice. So that should be like 30 degrees to the left. And then we'll hit the space a couple times. Sure enough. And see how it's rolling against the edge rather than bouncing? I'll show you how to do the bounce. And we'll run this one more time. Let's say do 3 to the right, D 3 times. There you go. So, like I said, that quickly you've got a really large chunk of the game. You've got the control, and you've got the you've got the angle, and you've got the application of velocity. So now it's just creating a good UI that communicates that to the user, as well as giving them more minute control. Like I said, maybe velocity should be increments of 0.2. Maybe the change in angle should be 5 degrees. Your choice. Okay, so couple quick things. I also did not put the cup in yet, so let's do that first because we know the ball will eventually get down there. So let's do get object, create empty. And we'll add physics, box collider. We'll lower this so it's below the table because you don't want to give them credit unless it actually goes through into the cup. In your game, you'll have an actual cup object unless you want people to be able to stare down into the abyss, which is typically how I feel when I play golf games. So, all right, so what we need to do, we need this object to know when that object has collided with it. So we're going to use this other script. So you're going to right click, create, C#, and I called it CupCon. You can call this cup if you want. At the moment, we're not going to really do anything with the name. We might eventually have the scene load based on the cup name. So like course 1 would have cup 1, course 2 would have cup 2, and based on the name of the cup tells them which level will load next, that kind of thing. So we'll take CupCon. I believe, let's set that to trigger. Don't think it has to be, but I believe this will still work. And in CupCon, it's pretty simple. We're just looking for a trigger. So we're simply saying on trigger enter, and it's colliding with an other object. And then we just say, what is the name of that other? So if other.name, make sure you use a double equal sign, is equal to sphere, because that's the name of the golf ball object. So if other.name is equal to sphere, then debug.log load level, which means a message will show up down here that just says load level. Clearly, that doesn't load the level. That's just carving out the section where you will put the load level. Since there's no other levels, there's nothing for me to load, so the coding wouldn't work anyways. But again, placeholder, so you're carving out the space, the place for the routine. Okay, so if I didn't make any mistakes, so the sphere has the collider, it's called sphere. The cup has the script, it has a collider, it's a trigger. We chose on trigger enter, and it's checking for an object name sphere. So that should work. So that we don't have to wait all day, let's add 1, 2, 3. That's still going to take all day. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sure enough, load level appeared down there. So there you go. We're just going to do a quick little tweaking of the physics, and then like I said, you're going to take it from there. And if you want to see more features, just let me know, and I will do part 2, part 3, however many you guys want. And all right, so we said the basic physics. All right, so the ball does not bounce. No matter how much velocity we added, it would collide and then it would just run along the side. So we need it to bounce. So you need a physics material. So right click, create physics material, and we'll call this ball PHY mat. So it's a physics mat. And we click on our ball object. Now the physics material goes right here. So sphere collider, material, take that, put it there. This doesn't have many settings. It has dynamic friction, static friction, and bounciness. Bounciness is what we care about. We'll do 1. And now if we run this, if I didn't forget anything, it should now bounce. At least the first time. It might then kind of drag anytime after that. So let's rotate it twice to the left, add some force. Well, not force, velocity, excuse me. Add force is actually a separate line. Did I do it wrong? Ball mat. Let's add it to the wall. I thought I had to add it to the ball itself. Ball mat. Mesh collider. And we'll rotate A couple times, add some velocity. There we go. So that made it bounce. Okay, so adding the ball mat to the wall as opposed to the ball itself. But as you can see, it still runs. But the reason why it's running now is because of the initial issue that we mentioned, and that it doesn't have enough drag on it. So that's the final thing for this video. We will add the drag and then we will be done. So that one is easy. So rigid body, I said we weren't going to change these yet first. Well, drag is set at 0. So change it to something. Angular drag. Now it's important to differentiate the two. One is the motion moving and one is the rotation, okay? So if you want this to slow down the rolling, then you can add a number here as well. And this is what I mean. You're just going to tinker around until you get what you want with these. And I mentioned a sand trap. What you can do is you can dynamically change these with code that if you go into, say, a sand trap, you suddenly change the drag to 5, that kind of thing. So again, if you want to see that in a later video, we can do that. So let's click on space a few times, click on that, and then you can already see it is slowing down. There we go. And like I said, for the moment, we're going to add the Q key, which stops the angle of velocity. And then what you can do at that point is, since it reset it to, reset the angle to 0, 0, 0, then what would happen is if I fire again, it should now fire forward. Yep. Okay, so just like that, you added angular drag and drag. And that actually reminds me, right now we just reset this. We probably should also make sure that the angular drag is truly 0, because that's just resetting the angle. It's not actually getting rid of the angular velocity. So let's do that. So I think that's just dot angular velocity and just set it to, I think that's a vector 3. So this is more of a failsafe. So we're going to want to set the angular velocity as well as the actual velocity to the linear velocity, so it's forward momentum. So both it's rotational and forward momentum, because you can actually have one and not the other. So like, for instance, you think a tire spinning in mud. Well, it's not moving forward, but it's spinning, so it has angular velocity. Or you can have an object moving forward that's not spinning, like say someone is skating. It's moving forward, but their foot isn't exactly rotating. So it's important to differentiate between velocity and angular velocity. And I don't have to run that again because, like I said, that's really just a fail safe. So, and that's one of the things you want to do. You want to keep your players from breaking the game. So there's not like a lot of control here, because you could still hit these buttons while the ball is moving. So we're going to put in controls to disable those things when the ball is in motion. But I think this is a really solid start. So now you've seen how to make the golf courses, you've seen how to control the physics, you've seen how to control the ball itself. So this is a really good start to a golf game. Again, if you want to see more features, please leave a comment and tell me what feature you'd like to see. And if there's enough interest, I will do more. And I hope this has been helpful to you. And please enjoy the rest of your night.